Hey, I haven't made a video in like forever. So I figured I'd do a reaction video because those seem to do really well, and my Girl Defined video seems to be continually gaining views, so why not do another one of those things? And I have a PragerU video here that seems promising. PragerU, if you're unfamiliar, is not a university in the slightest, but instead a YouTube channel, which hosts various conservative figures, I guess, giving 5-minute spiels of their pet topics. This is a video from Andrew Klavan, who's a writer and podcaster for the Daily Wire. If you're unfamiliar with the Daily Wire, it's Ben Shapiro's publication. If you're unfamiliar with Ben Shapiro, God bless you. And this video is entitled, "Who Needs Feminism?" I'm sure it will be an interesting and nuanced look at feminism in the 21st century. I'm going to ask one thing of you, dear audience member. This is going to be a video about feminism, and I know that people get really riled up online about feminism, but I'm going to be very civil in my response to Andrew Klavan, so all I ask of you is that you similarly be civil and argue in good faith in the comment section of this video. If the discussion is good and people are making interesting arguments, I'll probably end up making a comment response video and address more of my points in depth and respond to people's criticism. So please and thank you. All right, with that out of the way, let's get down to business.
I am an anti-feminist. Feminism is a mean-spirited, small-minded, and oppressive philosophy.
We're off to a good start, yeah.
That can poison relations between the sexes, relations which for most of us provide some of life's deepest pleasures and consolations. Feminism has attempted to bully us all into accepting an obvious lie. The lie that men and women have the same powers, talents, proclivities, and desires, and that...
Yeah, I'd agree with him. That is a lie. Men and women are different. And I think that most feminists would actually agree with me that men and women are different. I mean, if we think that men and women are exactly the same, then how do trans people exist? Obviously, there's something written, like, in our personalities, our souls, I don't know how you want to talk about it, that give us gender, but like, I don't think that it means that some people are better at STEM than other people.
Consequently, any discrepancy in their professional paths is due to bigotry and must be corrected by force of culture and law.
Yeah, so this is a common sort of talking point where they argue that there's like an inherent difference in men and women, and therefore that's why there's like gaps in different professions. And one of the interesting things here is that the image that appears of the different professions is you have the men's professions and then the women's professions down here. One of the things that's listed is secretary, which, fun fact, wasn't a woman's profession until the 20th century. Before that, it was a pretty exclusively men's field. So I don't think that there's anything biologically inherent in either men or women that they want to be secretaries.
Shoving that lie down our throats, feminism has made both men and women less happy and less free.
No, I think feminism has made people more happy and more free, because it's freed them from gender roles and being confined to a very small number of professions.
Now, I'm going to have to speak in generalities, and I understand there are all kinds of exceptions to what I'm about to say. But
good on him for clarifying that. A lot of people don't, and they just sort of speak in these generalities as though they're true for everyone. And I appreciate the fact that he's clarifying that he's not speaking about everyone.
Generalities remain generally valid. Feminism denigrates masculinity in men by relentlessly calling us toxic for our flaws rather than appreciating our natural qualities of energy, risk-taking, and leadership.
He's just glossing over what feminists call toxic as far as like men's toxic flaws, which tend to be things like, you know, beating women, raping women, generally just sort of exploiting women. That's kind of toxic behavior towards women. It's a pretty massive hand wave there as far as they just point out our flaws and don't talk about where we excel. Also, I don't think that anyone hates it when men do a good job leading. I think they prefer there was more gender parity in leadership, but don't think that women hate, I don't think that feminists hate men's good qualities.
But it also denigrates femininity in women, working to replace most women's commitment to relationship and child-rearing with male obsessions, such as career status and strength.
Kind of. I think this is true in some ways. I definitely think that if you look at things like Lean In, there's a lot of focus on career prowess, and you just need to be like one of the guys to become a CEO. When I think really we need to be telling men to lean back, that some of this extremely toxic work until you die corporate culture is not great for men either. But I think feminism, especially if we talk about the shift from second to third wave feminism, I think third wave feminism is a lot more open to the idea that hey, some women just want to be mothers, and that's okay.
What's the result? Take a look at the quintessential feminist icon, Rosie the Riveter, flexing her muscle. The truth is, any man of the same size and fitness can make a bigger, stronger muscle than Rosie can. By herding women away from their feminine.
Yeah, but we don't live in a labor-intensive economy. We live in the information age. Rosie the Riveter can code just as well as her male counterpart guys. She doesn't need to be able to bench press more than him to be as productive of a worker. What?
Natures, feminism seeks to transform them from first-rate women into second-rate men. Now, perhaps you'll protest. Isn't feminism simply the idea that women have the same human rights as men?
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. That philosophy is called classical liberalism, which holds that we are all equally endowed by God with the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, so he kind of has a point here. If you look at classical liberal thinkers, you do see sort of feminist elements. I think a good example would be Mary Wollstonecraft would probably be a quintessential classical liberal thinker who's writing about the vindication and rights of women. You even have John Stuart Mill, who's really big deal classical liberal thinker, and he's writing about women's rights. And I think it's not a coincidence that you see the beginning of first wave feminism in the mid 19th century, sort of going along with classical liberal ideas. I think it sort of comes out of classical liberalism, although classical liberalism not full of people who supported the idea that women had the same access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I think there were definitely classical liberal thinkers who thought that, and that's why we ended up with first wave feminism.
But wait, doesn't the Declaration of Independence say that all men are created equal? Yes, classical liberalism was an idea conceived by and largely for Christian white men. But, like all ideas, good and bad, classical liberalism has evolved over time according to its internal logic, so it now includes all races and both sexes.
So he decided to ignore that, there were women classical liberal thinkers. I mean, there weren't a lot, they weren't the big ones, but they were there. And instead argue that classical liberalism just sort of evolved out of nothing into accepting women. There wasn't an ideological movement to say that women have the same rights as men. No. And it's weird because it's clear whoever made the animations, which, listen, I'm pretty sure with PragerU videos, the people who are speaking in the video probably don't even see the animations before the video goes up. But they include images of first wave feminists. Don't you think that these are ideologically related and not just a natural evolution, that perhaps early feminists influenced classical liberalism to include women? Maybe? All right.
Good job, Christian white men. Thanks for the great idea.
Again, it's they didn't invent these concepts. There were Christian white women who were writing about this.
As its excuse for the damage it does to our lives, feminism has developed the historical mythology that men have oppressed women and now must be suppressed in their turn to even things out.
Okay, I just want to say that this is not what I believe. I can't speak for all feminists because I am just one feminist and it is a big tent of a lot of people who believe a lot of different things. But I personally believe that feminism means access to individual rights. It means sort of the end of gender roles, and that doesn't just benefit women, that also benefits men. Being able to choose professions and hobbies that you want to do instead of having to be forced into a limited set based on your gender, that more benefits women than it does men, but that still benefits men and doesn't require oppressing men in turn.
Let me propose a different narrative that has the advantage of possibly being true. Insofar as men and women are physical creations, their central purpose is the production of more human beings. Women are therefore fashioned in body and mind to make and nurture children, and men to protect and support those children during their relatively long maturation period. All societies shape themselves around these necessities. They created structures that formalized gender roles and attempted to ensure the paternity of children so that men would care for their own. In many societies, these structures became increasingly ritualistic and oppressive for women.
Yes, 100%. If you look at a lot of institutions that we would now consider to be quite sexist, things like arranged marriages and not being allowed to divorce your husband, these things definitely are based around ideas of wanting to ensure paternity and make sure that your breeding partner isn't breeding with anyone else and ensure that you have a breeding partner. A lot of male anxiety about female reproductive power. And that's not to say that gender depression doesn't exist outside of reproductive oppression. I'm just saying that it seems to be a pretty large part of it. And I'm surprised, honestly, that he would address this in such an honest way. Let's see what happens next.
But the opposite happened in the Christian West.
What? No. Like, listen, I'm not one of those people who are like, Christianity is like inherently oppressive or patriarchal. I think that like most religions contain patriarchal elements, but like there's not... Christianity doesn't save you from having patriarchal institutions. I don't understand. Okay, let's just keep going.
Why? Take a look at your Bible. Proverbs 31. The biblical ideal of a good woman is not only strong, kind, and wise, she's also a creative and economic dynamo.
Hey, we're getting back to the girl-defined stuff. Proverbs 31 comes up a lot when you try to talk to Christians about sexism in the Bible, which is definitely there. He's not mentioned Ephesians yet, which asks women to submit to their husbands. And now there's going to be a bunch of people in the comments, as there is whenever I bring this up, that, well, if you read the next section, that's not what it says. It says that men should also submit to their wives. And it's like, yeah, but that's like not how it was enforced. It doesn't matter that you can cite particular biblical passages that aren't sexist. That doesn't mean that it wasn't enforced in sexist ways.
Christianity sanctified motherhood in the person of Mary and celebrated women's fortitude and virtue in the female saints.
Female saints are super rad. You should look up Thecla if you don't know who she is.
The church created a version of marriage intended to protect women.
Well, but it got rid of women's right to divorce, which, you know, arguably was better for women if we're talking about ancient Rome, where it was much easier for men to divorce their wives than for wives to divorce their husbands. But again, it sort of goes back to the stuff I was talking about earlier when it comes to reproductive partners and wanting control over women. If a woman can't leave you, well, you kind of treat her however you want, which is not great.
And designed the philosophy of chivalry, which instructed men to use their superior strength for women, not against them.
Yeah, but chivalry is also kind of about winning women, and it's like kind of objectifying this idea of winning women. Just a smidge. They're not objects you can win.
Individuals can be incredibly abusive to one another, men and women both.
Yeah, but what's really important is, do the structures enable abuse and protect it? I think that makes a world of difference.
But over time, Christendom tended to elevate, protect, and ultimately include women as women in the great enterprise of Western civilization.
Yeah, but there were women who held positions of power outside of Christendom, and I don't really think the treatment of women in Christendom was particularly unique or different compared to the rest of the medieval and ancient world. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a scholar of ancient societies, but that seems fishy to me.
Now, the developments of modernity have created special challenges for women. Industry removed clothing and food production from the home to the factory, and thus deprived homemakers of their traditional businesses.
Yes, I too am just beyond myself upset that it no longer takes a woman 3 days to do the laundry.
Children lost their monetary value to parents by leaving home to fend for themselves.
Yes, such a shame we no longer have child labor. Like, what? Dude, you're a capitalist. Like, wait, why are you advocating a return to agrarian values? This doesn't make any sense.
So, while motherhood and homemaking remain the most important spiritual activities of humankind, modernity has stripped those enterprises of their former economic power. But in a Western civilization dedicated to equal rights, these challenges come along with fresh opportunities. New technologies and effective birth control allow individual women to tailor gender roles to their personal liking or abandon them altogether.
Yeah, but also thanks to feminism. I mean, if we're talking about women's career opportunities in the 1970s, if you looked at job listings, they were literally gender segregated. You couldn't apply for the entry-level positions that led to things like being a CEO. And God forbid, if you get pregnant or even just get married, you're probably going to lose your job. If it wasn't for feminism fighting not only for things like anti-discrimination laws and the end of segregated job listings, and even things like access to education so that women could be things like engineers, we wouldn't have the opportunities we do today.
None of this is a reason to attack men. In fact, these new opportunities are largely the result of men's inventions and their ideas.
Okay, I don't know what inventions in particular he's talking about. There were a lot of inventions in the 20th century, and I will concede that, like, a large percentage of them were men's inventions, but women also had a part in it, especially if we're talking about the history of computers and computer programming, which women did because it wasn't considered economically valuable.
And none of it requires women to abandon the femininity which is one of the graces of our world.
Yeah, women can now work outside the home without it meaning that they can't have a home. It's good.
It's just change and progress, that's all. With honest thought and goodwill, we can adapt over time without the angry, bitter, and dishonest attacks on our human nature by feminists. I'm Andrew Klavan for Prager University.
All right. There's a few different threads going on throughout this video. So I think the first one is that women having rights is just sort of the march of technology on, that classical liberalism will just evolve and include women just by coincidence. That's just how it will naturally evolve. The technology will evolve, and that will give women greater opportunity and rights, as though there aren't women who are living in technologically developed countries who, you know, for example, only recently got the right to drive? Like, it's clear that these things aren't necessarily correlated together. You can correlated together, and like we need feminism to change classical liberalism to include women. You need someone like, say, Abigail Adams saying to John Adams, what about the women? You have to have these colonial, like, I think they're sort of called patriotic motherhood movements, this idea that you need educated women in order to have educated sons to like evolve into feminism. These things don't just happen. You have to have people fighting for rights. You don't just get more technology and that means that women all of a sudden get to work outside the home. You have to have people fighting so women can have the same educational opportunities as men, so they can have the same employment opportunities as men. These things don't just fall out of the sky. And I mean, there are people who argue that, like, the only reason that feminism was successful is because capitalism decided that you could increase the workforce by allowing women to work and therefore their labor to get exploited and yada, yada, yada. But that's not what he's arguing. He's arguing that this just sort of appears naturally out of Christendom, which is sort of the second thread, is this weird idea that patriarchal institutions only exist outside of Christian Western society, which is just like not true. I mean, it's like pretty clear that some pretty messed up things happened in Christendom, and there are rights that women are afforded under Islamic law that they are simply not afforded under Christian law. That's not to say that, like, living in an Islamic country today is better than living in a predominantly Christian nation today. But you can't say that, like, Christianity is somehow immune to patriarchal institutions. That doesn't add up. So one of the things you also see in this video is in today's day and age, you can't say that women should be confined to the home, which is great. The Overton window has shifted. You can 100% be a conservative woman who wants a career and wants to work outside the home. Instead, you have this argument of complementarianism. I think that's the right pronunciation. And we see this in the Girl Defined writing as well. This idea that men and women are just made differently. And here it's made less as a God imbued men and women with different traits and more that men and women just genetically evolve differently for different roles in society. And this is true to a certain extent. Yes, men, on average, much stronger than women. But, like, that doesn't mean that women lack particular traits that would be good in positions of power. That doesn't mean that women are then second-rate men if they're working outside the home. Because there's sort of this assumption that, well, typically male fields are that way solely because men are more interested in those things and better at those things, which I don't necessarily agree with. I definitely think that there are more male CEOs because being a CEO fucking sucks. And men are much more willing to put up with it because they gain a lot more social capital from being CEOs that women just simply don't get. I'm just rambling. I hate this. I hate this format. I don't like it. I don't like this at all. I'm never doing this again.